Welcome to our talk tonight. I am Vivian New. I'm one of our chapter's co-presidents, in our chapter being the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. And welcome to our talk tonight, A Few Native California Oak Mysteries by Keuter. Before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge that the work done by the Santa Clara Valley chapter of CNPS lies in the homeland of the Amamutsin tribal band, the Tamiya Nation, the Ramayatush Ohlone, and the Muwekma Ohlone, who still live and thrive in this area today. We hope to learn from them and support their work to restore traditional practices and heal from historical trauma. If you're not familiar with the California Native Plant Society, we are a nonprofit environmental education organization that was founded in 1965. We have over 12,000 members in 36 chapters that are spread all over California and Baja California. So we are not just a state organization. We are not even just an American organization. We are actually international. Our chapter, the Santa Clara Valley chapter, covers Santa Clara County, as well as southern San Mateo County, up to about San Bruno Mountain. Beyond that, the Yerba Buena chapter, which is another great chapter. The CNPS mission is to protect California's native plants and their natural habitats today and into the future. We do that through science, education, stewardship, gardening, and advocacy. If you are not currently a member, we would love to have you join us. Your membership benefits include not just one, but 2 magazines, Artemisia, which is a more scientifically oriented magazine that has a lot of great plant science articles, and Flora, which is our general interest magazine. It has a lot of great gardening as well as other general topics of interest. You'll also receive our chapter newsletter, The Blazing Star, which gives you information about upcoming events as well as articles of local interest. We also have a number of local nurseries that give discounts to Native Plant Society members, and so you'll get that as well. And you also support all the work that CNPS does with your membership dollars. So if that is of interest and you're not currently a member, all you have to do is go to cnps.org/join, and you can sign up online. We also tonight, if you are not a member and you've not been a member previously, there should be a sign over there that gives you a discounted membership for your first year. And do you guys have that up there, or did I forget to put that? At any rate, there's yes, right there. Paul is holding it. So if you're not a member and would like to do that, there's a QR code on that. So snap that before you leave, and that'll take you to the discount. Yes.
Another great, and we need to add this to the slide there. Another great benefit is the field trips. We have a lot of great field trips, and the longer ones, which are the really fun ones that go to places like the desert, Joshua Tree, and things like that, are only open to members.
Or Evans Pass.
Yeah, or Evans
Pass.
Open to members.
Yeah,
And they're really a lot of fun.
that is an excellent point, Patricia. I will add that. We have a number of events coming up. Our chapter is actually a fairly active one. Right at this moment, in fact, we have an online plant sale going on, and that will be ending tomorrow. So what you do is you go online, you buy your plants, and then next Wednesday, you schedule a time to go by our nursery to pick those plants up. And that is, you can get to that from our website, cnps-scd.org. We also have a photo group that meets once a month online on Zoom. If you are a photographer and you want to share pictures, or if you just like to look at pretty pictures and hear photography tips and tips about where to see the flowers that people have taken pictures of, feel free to join the photo group. It's on the 4th Friday of every month. So the next meeting is on August 23rd. We also have a native plant ID group, and that used to be called Keen with Natives, but now it's more about general native plant ID as opposed to just Keen. The next meeting is on August 27th, and there's actually going to be a speaker that day, Ruth Hummer Smith. He's actually one of the co-authors of that wildflower book back there, and he's going to be talking about a website called plantid.net that he runs. It's a really excellent resource for identifying plants and learning more about them. If you're interested, that'll be at the Peninsula Conservation Center on Tuesday, August 27th. And the chair of the group is here, Janet. Yay, thank you, Janet. We also have a seed and cutting exchange coming up on September 22nd, so that's a little bit further in the future, but good time to collect seeds and join us. That's also at the Peninsula Conservation Center. That's on a Saturday. And we'll have cuttings, seeds, bring some if you have them, but even if you don't have anything to contribute, feel free to come by because there's always plenty of material to share. And it's a really wonderful way to expand your native plant garden for free. We also have a lot of work days. So if you enjoy getting your hands a little dirty and learning about native plants, we have work days at Lake Cunningham, at Cataldi Park, and the Native Plant Garden in Kirk Park. And that's every Saturday in August. And you can find out more about that on our website. So both on our website, cnps-scb.org, and our meetup group, meetup.com. If you snap a picture of this slide, those two QR codes will take you to the right place, but you can also just search for them. If you would like to, if you're not on our weekly news mailing list, I urge you to join. It's just one message a week, and it gives you an update on all the upcoming activities, reminds you of things like this talk and the things that I just mentioned. So a weekly reminder, and we also include information that we think would be of interest to people who like native plants. So we include information about activities from other organizations as well. It's a really nice newsletter message, and you can get to it by this long email address. You can get to that on our website, cnps-scb.org. So you don't have to remember that very long email address here. You can just go online and get to it. As I mentioned before, we have an online sale going on right now from our nursery, and that will go, I think, through tomorrow night. We end the sale when all the pickup slots, so you have to schedule a time to go pick up your plants, are filled. We still have slots right now, and I'm hoping we'll have them through the end of the day tomorrow, but it might end a little early. So if you're interested in getting some plants, we have a really good selection now. Once the plants are gone, if you have, I know it's still warm to plant, but there are some things that we have very limited selections of. If you want them, don't wait until the fall sale, because they could easily be gone by then. There's this sale. We will have another sale in September, right before that seed and cutting exchange. And so there's two opportunities to get plants. And once it's gone, it's gone. We've been propagating a lot over the summer, so there's a lot of fun stuff right now. All the proceeds benefit our chapter, so we really appreciate that too as well. Anyways, that's my spiel about the nursery. And I just wanted to mention again, there's this new book. It's from CNPS, Wildflowers of California. It is gorgeous and it is very complete. It's a field guide. The book is a little bit big. Can you hold it up? Just so it's back there. And it's only $22 here. It's a lot more online, and even from the CNPS store, I underpriced our state store. But I love the book. Take a look at it. I think it's wonderful. Does it have a key? I don't think it has a key. It's a lot of pretty pictures though. And our talks are not just done by me and our speaker. It's always a team effort. And so tonight, as greeters, we have Vicki Silvas-Young and Paul Billig. Thank you for being here. Our wildflower ambassador is Deb Hiraki, and our book sales is my husband, Ramon Gabriel. And now for the highlight, we have Al Keuter, whose sleuthing into oak mysteries began in 2013. Since then, he's ventured ever deeper into the science of leaf and fruit measurements, joining with DNA scientists in publishing 3 scientific papers exploring California red oak evolution and development. He volunteers as a curator at the herbarium at UC Santa Cruz. He's generated more than 40,000 images. He's made 900 collections of fruit and leaves for more than 500 oak trees in 38 California counties. He has a personal oak reference library of 700 plus books and manuscripts dating back to the 1600s. I'm so happy to have him here tonight. And he drove over from Santa Cruz, so I appreciate the extra travel. And I'm really looking forward to learning about all that you have to share tonight. So thank you, Al. If you want to come up and I will hand it over.
Now we're gonna do the incredible transfer of computers.
Yes, we are.
That's why I got the tape here.
Yeah.
I'll let you-
All right, I will take mine.
And then I have my masking tape right there. Keep it in forever. Yes. Okay, but it's not functions. Let's turn this on. Still good? Still good? Okay. Now we're getting there. All right. Well, I would like to share with you a variety of book mysteries tonight and get them all done in our time allotted, which is a little bit over an hour or roughly an hour. So let's show you the ones that I selected. Not going to go through them here because we're going to go through each one individually. So a common first question is, what's the big deal about oaks? Why do we even care? Well, oaks are an incredible keystone species, and one writer has determined that there are more species of organisms dependent on oaks in North America than any other forest tree. These organisms include lichens, fungi, bacteria, viruses, bryophytes, and someone has actually tallied the numbers for California within the last 10 years or so. So there are 58 different lizards, snakes, amphibians that crawl around in the oak forest. There are 150 mammals that in some way are tied to the oak trees, either deer that eat the acorns or predators that eat the critters that eat the acorns or eat the bugs that eat the leaves, et cetera, et cetera. And there are 170 birds, some of them very intimately involved with oaks, such as this acorn woodpecker stuck in a greenery tree, if you've all seen greenery trees. But many don't go to that length. Others use hollow areas inside the oak trees. And then certainly many of them eat the critters that are eating the oaks. Okay. So I jumped past this. So then I didn't talk about the 5,000 species of insects that are crawling all over our California oak trees. And of those, 1,000 rely solely on oak trees. Without the oaks, they would be gone. So I've got an example of one that can eat pretty much anything, and that's that tussock moth larvae up there on the upper right. But these across the bottom are much more specialized. We have an acorn weevil. Has anybody seen that deep look video that KQED does? They actually deal with the acorn weevil. It's quite wonderful if you get a chance to watch that. In the middle, you've all seen the California oak moths. They're these nasty, boring little moths. They're not very pretty. And they have kind of very indistinguishable caterpillars, and they strip the leaves off oak trees every so often. And then the oak trees grow all the leaves back the next year. Unlike many moths, which build cocoons and pupate in the cocoons, the oak moth burrows underground and creates this gorgeous, fabulous pupa that probably no one ever has seen. Has anyone ever seen a California oak moth pupa? Is that the most gorgeous thing? And then on the right, we have an oak gall wasp. These are in the family Cynipidae, which are totally specialized to feed on oaks or to have their larvae feed on oaks. This is a female. They're about that big. That's a female ovipositing into the surface of a leaf. And we're going to dive a little deeper into that particular group because they're so obligate on the oaks and they're kind of representative of the relationships. So everyone know what an oak gall is? You've all seen them. You know, it's this like cancerous growth sort of plant tissue that reacts to the critter that's gobbling on it. And that critter can be a fly larva, could be a mite, could be another kind of an organism, could be bacteria, a nematode, but more commonly, it's the 1,400 plus species of cyniphid wasps worldwide. And by the way, if you are a budding scientist who wants to study oak galls, this is a fabulous area because new gall wasps are being discovered and described all the time. They're quite unknown, especially in the Southwest of North America. So this particular one is quite gorgeous. This is found around here in Canyon live oak. And this is a mushroom gall. And this is the little wasp, shrink it down for you. The little wasp that feeds on it. Bear in mind that these wasps are very specialized across either a small group, kinds of trees, or even an individual species of tree. And there is one that has been described that has only been found from a single tree. What's really interesting is that these wasps will stimulate galls that are specific to that species of wasp. They're on a certain part of the plant and they look a certain way again and again and again. It doesn't matter which tree it is, if within that species or group, it will look the same everywhere. There are more interesting things to tell you, but I want to share with you more galls. So this is a leaf-fold midge gall. Little maggots crawling around in there. This is a very simple gall. The tree is reacting by, it looks like dumping out some kind of anthocyanin substance to try to kill it, not doing a very good job. On the same plant, we've got a oak gall, a cyniphid oak gall, there, a flower gall, and it is forming these tiny little kernel galls on the male flowers of the oak tree. So we're zoomed in pretty good, as you can see. On the right, we have a Erinium mite gall, and they're a very basic gall. Looks just like a pit in the leaf of the tree, the oak tree. And this is a shreve oak. So normally these shreve oaks don't grow a lot of hairs, so oak trees can grow hairs on their leaves. But when infected with this gall, you get this pit that is just chock full of trichomes. Not really known what they're used for. If that's what the iridium mite is eating, or if it's a place to hide, not quite sure. That's what those can look like. But galls can be much more gorgeous. So this is a urchin gall. Not surprisingly that it would be called that. And I collected that up in Northern California on a blue oak. It's on the underside of the leaf. You are probably all aware of the apple galls. They're usually black or dark brown, and they've been used for ink making and so on and so forth. This is a little different one. This is on live oaks, whereas those bigger ones that you're used to are on valley oaks. And you can see that it's just so gorgeous in the spring when it's first formed. And this is on a hybrid oak, hybrid red oak in the red oak. And I just love those. They look like Hershey Kisses over on the right, except they're not chocolate, they're candy. And but they're not. They're actually galls. They're the red cone gall on a very old oak tree in Davis, California. Huge old oak tree, valley oak. But we can't stop there, can we? We must go on. How about these beautiful little disc galls on a tiny little blue oak leaf? Just so colorful and gorgeous. They won't stay that way. They'll get dark and brown and drop off. But these, I found that very, very tantalizing. That gall over there is a twig clasping gall that has an extra feature that the plant has been stimulated to create a nectar. that's exuded by that gall. And you say, well, why do you want all these very territorial and nasty ants all over your gall? Well, there are things called parasitoids, and they have really long ovipositors. And they can land on these galls and oviposit, lay an egg on the individual that's the gall border in there. So you don't want that to happen if you're a gall insect. Great to have friends who are very powerful and strong.
Are all of these galls specific to those particular oak plants, or any of them generalists?
Okay, okay, so we haven't gotten into that yet. We have red oaks, white oaks, golden oaks, we have sections of oaks, and in there, within each section, we've got a bunch of species. And some of these galls are specific to species, but more generally, they are specific within the section. So since this one was on a blue oak, it's going to be in the white oak group. I know a blue oak is a white oak with a spell. But we'll get to that too. Oops. And here's a lovely, lovely, strange colored, forward-looking beet oak from Southern California, from a scrub oak on its way, a scrub oak named Quercus, let me not get this wrong, John Tuckerash. I don't know if anybody's heard of that species, but one of the many scrub oaks that we don't have to talk about tonight, which is wonderful. So over there, that's from a tree near where I live, and that is not surprisingly called a sausage gall, and it has taken over the catkin, a little strand-like catkin of an oak flower. The male flowers are arranged on the catkin, as we'll see in greater detail, and have bulged up into a sausage, this reddish sausage. We suspect that's anthocyanin again, giving it that color. And even with that intrusion and all this new tissue, the male flowers are still frantically trying to open and spew their pollen out into the wind for the next generation. Well, that took a little sideline, and now it's time for a question that I always get asked. How many oaks are there? Where are they? And we should just take a look right now. First of all, that number is very indeterminate. I've seen a number of species of oaks worldwide as high as 600 plus, or as low as 300 and some odd, depending on the author, the time. Bear in mind, that's going to change month to month, year to year. People describe new species, or authors decide to take species and lump them together, decide that they're all not valid, or take a species and explode it into a whole bunch of other species. So the taxonomists have to stay busy, and they do. So it's interesting that the oaks are found worldwide, but only in the northern hemisphere.
Oh,
That line is the equator. Well, you'll see there's a little bit of deviation. Over in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, you see a group of 19 species in Borneo, Java, Sumatra, and they have these lovely receptacles for the acorns. They're just these concentric rings, thus the name the ring cup oaks. All right, so we now know we have a bunch of oaks in the world, but what about Western Hemisphere? New World, we have 265, again, approximately changeable, dynamic. And we have one species in South America, just above the equator. And we have 95 approximately species in the United States, distributed mostly in the east and west, and with a little smattering in the middle, mostly in the southwest. And 21 species, notice not an estimate, 21 species in California, because that number has been the same for at least 2 decades. So we're going to count on that till tomorrow. So 8 species in Santa Clara County. So that's kind of where we want to be headed. And then the next question is, which ones are they? Well, guess what? I'm going to hold you off here. I'm putting in a bookmark. Does anyone recognize that bookmark? That's a library bookmark from this library. That was an award winner for bookmark art in 2023. So we're going to use a really cool, applicable bookmark. And then we move on.
How many species in Santa Cruz?
In Santa Cruz County, Oh, I'd have to look it up. Let me count them in my brain. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have not as many white oaks as you have. 5, 6. We have 6. Because we have 1 white oak. Primarily the valley oak. We don't have any scrub oak. We don't have Berwick quite into the county. It's right up on the county line. And we don't have, guess what? There's no serpentine in Santa Cruz County. So we don't have leather oak. So in blue oak, I don't remember if I've seen blue oak in Santa Cruz County, but mostly Levada. And those may have been brought by the early indigenous folks because they're found in very weird places, like where the indigenous folks had settlements. And the only ones that survive in, I know I'm deviating here. The only ones that survive in Santa Cruz County are those that were around railroad stations from the 1800s. I guess when you were setting up a railroad station, you wanted to leave that nice little oak tree there that then ended up being 300-400 years old over time. And other than that, they're all gone. You don't find any anywhere else in the county except in the San Lorenzo River drainage. But again, another talk, another night. That's a bit, I want to follow up on that.
I would love to hear that.
Well, there's more here. So let's ask the question, where did the native California oaks in general come from? Once everybody knows this, I can work right through it. Well, fossil evidence says they came from the north of North America. But how did they get to North America, the northern part of North America? Well, there's some disagreement about that. The obvious way is, well, they came from Eastern Asia over what we now call the Bering Strait or the Bering Land Bridge, depending on when you look at it. But that's not decided because there are 50 million years ago, there were other connections that came from Western Europe that were reasonably feasible for the introduction of the oak. So we just don't know where they came from, but we know they separated genetically from the oaks in the old world 52 million years ago. That's the best estimate. And the map is only 40 million years old. That's the best I could get. Here you notice there is no California. The west coast of California where the Sierra Nevada and the water lapping up against the foothills. So let's look at a map 25 million years ago, and it sort of covers the time that I need. And that is when there was a lineage divergence in North America. The California colonizers and the Eastern North America colonizers in 2 groups, not just all one kind of oak. The red oaks did this and the white oaks did it. The white oaks did it earlier. There was something that caused this split in those lineages. And it's kind of nice to look and say, okay, 15 million years ago, roughly, the red oaks did their split. What does that look like looking at the morphology of their leaves? Well, some of these are California black oaks. They're natives to California, 15 million years separated from some Eastern North America oak. Kind of look a lot alike, don't they? And here I'll give you a little like, top and bottom of each leaf. No one cares. So here we go. We got kind of a snowflakey version of a California black oak from Monterey County. We have a more stellate version from San Diego County. We've got in the lower right a red oak. I know a red oak. That's a red oak. What a weird concept that I collected in central Vermont. And finally, a pin oak, which is definitely an East Coast oak, but it's widely planted elsewhere, including in Santa Cruz, California, in a cemetery where I found that particular tree. And that's the one that has the greatest affinity in terms of how it looks to the black oak. There are differences, so we can actually tell them apart, thankfully.
Is it closely enough related that species can use it?
I'm sorry.
Is it closely enough related that our insect species can use it?
I keep expecting, because a red oaks are supposed to be able to hybridize, which we'll talk about. And one would think that since they're red oaks and these are red oaks, I have not seen any successful hybridization. I would worry about that with arboreta, where you bring in stuff from all over the world, where all this pollen, because these are wind pollinators flying everywhere. Oh my God, what do we end up with in the surrounding community? But I haven't seen it. So here we go. Guess what? Another split. This one kind of unexpected. Because we still got to colonize Mexico and other places south. Why wouldn't the California oaks continue kind of down that line? Why do we bring them all the way over from eastern North America? Well, there obviously was some impediment, some geological or environmental impediment 10 to 20 million years ago that stopped both the white oaks and the red oaks at their different times that they did this divergence, this genetic divergence. So there's more history, mystery, but it's much more recent. And I want to insert another bookmark. So I will insert another bookmark and we will get back to this. I'm willing, and I think I'm still okay on time. So now we're going to come back. Now it's time to dive into those names a little bit. And for some people, this is going to be a turn off. For others, they're going to go, yes, I've been waiting for this. So at any rate, that map that I put up earlier with all the pretty colors on it to show where the oaks were, there's more information there than just how many oaks there were. There is information as to which groups of oaks are where. And so what's interesting is, first of all, you've got a genus that's called Quercus. You have two subgenera, one of which is called Quercus. And you have the white oaks, which are section Quercus. Yes, thank God it goes no deeper than that, but at least 3 levels can be kind of confusing for folks. So what you notice about section Quercus, got the blue line, the blue border, is that it's found throughout the world, well, throughout the northern hemisphere of the world. You see it in just about every continent. You see it in North America, Mexico, into Central America, not into South America. You see it well developed in Europe. You see it barely touching the northern part of Africa, where it bounds the Mediterranean. And you see a little bit of Western Asia and Eastern Asia, with the majority of Asia totally neglected, which would sort of favor that the original migration of the oaks from the old world didn't come from the east, but came from the west. And then the eastern part of Eurasia was repopulated with the migration going back up. But again, there's no support for that other than looking at the map and going, gosh, that could be. So we have 2 subgenera divided into sections. We just keep fine-tuning them. And you can see where the various sections are. We're going to get into, but one thing to note, subgenus Ceres is all old world. There are no subgenus Ceres in the New World unless they've been brought and planted, which many have been incorporated. But the subgenus Quercus is not the same. There are 3 sections that are only found in the New World, and those would be Lobate, Lobate, people pronounce it differently, the red oaks. Section Protobalanus, the golden oaks, and section Parentes, which we're not going to talk about because that's restricted to the southeastern part of the United States and points further south and west. So section Quercus and section Pontiki are in both parts of the world. Pontiki is interesting. One species called the deer oak in Northern California. And it's related to a small group of species in Western Asia. Go figure. That's the genetic wisdom at this point in time. Section Quercus, as you can see, is everywhere, which would make one think it might have been the oldest oak and the progenitor of all others, but more research needed to be certain of that. So I'm going to skip this screen because it sort of restates the same thing that taxonomists have been slicing and dicing, finer and finer cuts, and even below section is a subsection, and then finally you see a genus and a species, for heaven's sakes. But then we have varieties, oh no, and hybrids. So we'll leave that. But I promised we would get back to which species, heaven forbid, we leave without doing this, are found in Santa Clara County. So I'm going to give you a list, and for the geekiest of the oak geeks, you may read this lower part, but no one else need, Because these are things that are reported in Santa Clara County, but are not absolutely established to be here. They're genes of some of these may be here. But are these actual organisms here? I know, sad. And there's some really great arguments that they're not. There are some arguments that they are, but let's not get tied up in that. That's another 3-hour waiting. Let's instead just look at the ones we know are here. We've got 4 red oaks, 3 of them species, 1 a hybrid, golden oaks, 1 white oaks, 4, and again, we reiterate, the black oak is a red oak and the blue oak is a white oak. But what's really cool about the sections is hybridization occurs within these sections, but never intersectionally. So you will never have a red oak breeding with a white oak and giving you a red white oak. You know, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in the laboratory as far as I know, and it definitely does not happen in the wild. So let's dig into these a little deeper. Let's start with the red oaks. The red oaks are only found in the New World. And you can see that their distribution is very discrete. We have Eastern North America, we have the Mexican group and down and barely touching South America, and we have the native California red oaks, which are split into this subsection called Agrifoliae. Looks a lot like Agrifolia. That's because that's what it's named after. That's the basal species name for this subsection. That's all you need to know about that. Let's see what they look like. Coast live oak, California black oak in the upper right-hand corner, shreve oak in the lower right-hand corner. Now, what I've done is place the chase oak in the middle because it's the hybrid between the coast live oak and the California black oak. Oh, now we can dive in a little deeper here. Look at the pictures, blow it up even bigger because this screen is so great. I have nothing like this, and it's wonderful. So the leaves are oval, don't have a lot of veins. The veins stand up on the bottom. They've got hairy armpits. Everybody heard that term? Okay.
This is Quercus agrifolia.
Yeah, Quercus agrifolia, var agrifolia. We won't get into the fact that there's another variety in Southern California at high elevation, and you cannot see the bottom of the leaf, but another story, another time.
Okay.
So you'll notice these receptacles are obconic. That's very typical of agrifolia and both varieties. And the fruit mature in a single season. Flowers bloom in the spring. By the fall, you have mature acorn, and that separates it from all the other native California red oaks. What's in common with white oaks, actually? All right, so we give you a quick look at that. Then we're going to pop up the shreve oak. Many people are not familiar with what a shreve. Can I have a show of hands? Who knows what a shreve oak is? Okay, so basically no one does. And the reason is that they were lumped together with the interior live oak until mid-1990s and separated off. Wait, this is totally different. Look at that. We got leaves that are glossy, they're big, they have no points on them, and they're entire. And look at those acorns, they're blunt, the nuts are blunt, the acorns are bulky. Don't look anything like that or anything like the interior live oak either. So. And then finally, the California black oak is distinctive. It is the only deciduous red oak, native California red oak. All the others are quote evergreen. They're sort of sub-evergreen, but whatever. Notice how distinctive these leaf margins are. They're deeply lobed, the sinuses are very deep, they're toothed, and the teeth have what I call awns. Some people call them processes. I've heard them called whiskers, but basically it's the same thing that's found here, except these are really short and they poke you. These are long and they don't poke you. And again, the acorns kind of look similar to the shreve oak acorns. They're kind of blunt tipped, kind of bulky. And then in the middle, we have our chase oak. And I'll zoom into it. But I don't have acorns to show you here. My wife and I planted them all in hopes of propagating it. Here is the chase oak. Why am I lingering on the chase oak? Because it is in Santa Clara County. The holotype tree is in Santa Clara County. It was on the old Chase Ranch, which doesn't exist anymore. Now it's the Castro Valley Ranch over by Gilroy on the coast side of the backside of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And it's thankfully the scientists who came up from Southern California in 1949 did a wonderful job measuring and surveying all the other trees in the neighborhood of this tree. It's a very privately held ranch. And I think they're afraid that scientists will go in there and say, well, you can't cut any of this stuff down. And so I just don't think they like having plant people in there. It took me a while to get it okay, but I did in 2017. And the funnest part was then being able to measure that trunk and see in the intervening years how much it had grown, and then to be able to calculate the age of the tree, or approximately calculate it. And my estimates that its birth year was no earlier than probably the early 1600s. And probably no later than the late 1700s. So this is one pretty darn old tree. And what does it look like? Well, it took another 6 years to get permission to come in again. And apparently I had not done anything bad during that time. And then suddenly it was, you can come in tomorrow, 2 hours. Oh my God, okay. So I managed to drag along Dr. Jeffrey Huey from Hartnell, who was a DNA guy, and he wanted to do some sampling there because we really like to not only have it be a morphological name based on its morphology, how it looks, but also on what its genetics look like, that it really is a cross between a coast sligo and a California black oak. So what does it look like? Well, apparently it looked very much like that until a week before our visit. So that's Dr. Huey, and Dr. Huey's about my height, and he's way in the foreground. And I just didn't want to take the time with Photoshop to cut him out and put him back with the tree and shrink him, so you could see just how big a tree that is.
Wow.
That's a big tree. Yeah, it's well over 20 feet in circumference. That's a big limb. And we couldn't see any reason why it parted company with the tree. Perhaps it was just too heavy over the years because it was huge. It was like a third of the tree was in that one limb. And maybe there was an interruption and, maybe it dried out for a couple of days, got really hot. There wasn't enough water going up there to maintain turgidity in that. Don't know. Didn't see any indication of insect damage. But the rest of the tree is still there. And I will hopefully more sooner than 6 years get to visit it again. So there you have it. Those are the red oaks with a little something extra, Santa Clara County. Golden oaks, easy. There's one in Santa Clara County, and there's hardly any in the world. This is their native habitat. California with some relictual populations out in the Southwest. They're desert species that match up with desert species that are found in Southern California as well. So there you go. I'm showing you a single species of golden oak. 3 samples. Wait, are you sure you're not showing me 3 different species? No, I'm not. We'll start on the lower left, and you'll see that when they're small, they really want to discourage herbivory, and they have the genetic palate to call it up when they need it and do this. Now, those aren't real spines on the end. They're just super sharp teeth in the margin, and they are hooky. And I wouldn't take a bite out of that. But you'll notice there's nothing gold about it. We'll come back to that. Then we'll go to the one on the upper right. Now, that one was a tree maybe this tall, but it was along the Salmon River, hanging out in a rock pile, ready to drop into the Salmon River. And I'm guessing the deer weren't so interested in eating that. And the plant didn't want to expend energy making all those little sharp little leaves. And that's what the leaves look like on that one. But you say, well, that's not golden either. And you know what? A lot of the canyon live oaks that you see don't have that golden color too. So you can't use that as an identifying constant for them. But here's, just to make you happy, here's one that does. So this is the underside of a third sample tree. And it was late in the year. And so I will show you, not my favorite micrograph, but it does clearly show you all the little golden hairs that make up that color. And they're sticky little devils, and they don't last forever. They come off. So you may have a tree that's golden in the spring with new foliage, and then the color's all gone by midsummer or autumn. So there you go. You get to see the trichomes, very specialized trichomes. And that's all there is about golden oaks. So on to the white oaks. Section quercus, worldwide distribution, and as you can see, broader distribution in North America. The connection between Eastern North America and Mexico is not broken as it was in the red oaks, and they venture up into central Canada. I mean, how fun can that be? And they have a greater distribution of relictual populations in the Southwest as well. But interestingly, they didn't like South America so much. So then we have our native California white oaks that almost make it to Canada, all the way down Baja. And they're a subsection as well. So they get their own little subsection in section quercus. And here are your beautiful 4 species of white oaks that are for sure here. The 2 tree species, which are deciduous, both, are on the right. The 2 scrubby species are on the left, and we're going to pop up bigger pictures. Okay, so let's start with the valley oak, which I think everyone knows valley oak. It's big, beautiful, has these wonderfully lobed leaves, which are clearly different than the red oak leaves, because they don't have sharp teeth on the ends of the lobes. They don't have the processes or ponds coming out of those teeth. There are no processes, there is no sharpness. But I caution you, I've picked a valley oak that is very valley oaky because there is introgression, whether it's current or whether it's historic, there's beam swapping going on. And if this happens to have picked up genes from some of the bushy and scrubby versions, they have quite sharp teeth. So you'll get not that much sharpness, but just a hint of a little sharpness that, wow, is that really a valley oak or is that something else? Well, it's a valley oak mostly, and it's got a little help in its heritage. Now, the color is not that pale green. I just love that sunshine shot showing off all the lobes. But this darker leaves down here represent the dark green color, just like with the galls we'll be looking at. So let's go to the upper right-hand corner to the blue oak. It's a very bluey blue oak because the leaves are mostly entire and they can vary a lot because this tree is closely related to those 2 shrubby oaks, more so than it is to lobata, to the valley oak. What differentiates it mostly, when you see a big old blue oak next to a big old valley oak, are the blue-green leaves. They're distinctly different than the green leaves that you see with the valley oak. Oddly though, when I look at those leaves, I don't think deciduous. They're thick. They look like a scrub oak leaf. And well, I won't get into it. In Southern California, there are some versions that are not deciduous. But let's just say up here, life is simple, and they are. All right, so now for our scrub oak and our leather oak. So the scrub oak is Northern California's scrub oak, our very own. We don't have to worry about sharing it. Well, we do share it with Southern California, but we don't have to worry about misidentifying it because all the weird scrub oaks are in Southern California. There's a bunch of them. And depending on where you are, what the plant looks like, they may be impossible to securely identify as what they are. But ours has kind of a shiny, not dull upper leaf surface. Clearly looks like something different than those. And it's not on serpentine, so guess what? It's our very own Northern California scrub oak quercus. Beautiful. Okay. The bottom one is very interesting little oak, especially to me, living in Santa Cruz with no serpentine. It is a serpentine tolerant plant. And it can even grow. I've seen it in Marin County on Mount Tam, albeit growing horribly, tiniest little thing, but growing on serpentine barrens directly. Whereas Mama was up the hill, just past the barrens with some dirt to live in, dropping those acorns down so that they would have this horrible life on the barrens themselves. But such is the life of the tree. Now you notice there is a variety. That means there's another variety that's in Southern California. I won't tell you anymore, except it doesn't live on serpent. So mysteries within mysteries. There it is, up close and personal.
Nice.
So there we go. And I don't know why, but I just feel like not everyone has seen a female oak flower. Everybody's seen a male oak flower. Have you seen an unfertilized female oak flower? The thing that grows into this giant acorn. I'm guessing there are folks here who haven't. You can raise your hand unless you're embarrassed. Okay, everybody's seen a female oak flower?
I've looked.
Oh, good, okay.
I've looked, but have not found.
Oh, all right. Well, we're gonna go hunting and we're gonna give you 2 ways to find them. So here we go. First, we gotta dispense with the boys. They're showy, they're out first. They're everywhere. Look closely at them. We've got the catkins, and we've got the flowers that have everything there except the female parts. That's another story I can tell where I found one that had both, but,
Cool.
yeah, it was cool. Here's what it looks like up close. You can see this particular male flower has bloomed, and it's got, in this case, 6 anthers mounted on, I wouldn't call those filaments, though that's the official name. I call them kind of stalks because they're very stocky, but we'll stick with the botanical name. And those anthers will open. I don't know exactly what causes it. Probably not a rainstorm, not a good time to open when you're a wind pollinated organism. So something makes them open, and suddenly all the pollen, these tiny little grains of pollen are gone. And off they go to do whatever it is pollen grains do. What about the girls? Where are the girls? Well, they're in this picture. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start down here. So that's last year's wood. See how it's dark brown? And it had 2 buds at least on the tip of it. And those buds popped. And these are this year's twigs growing, this year's growth age. And see this catkin here? I didn't do a very good job because I scanned it on the scanner. It's supposed to be down there. It's coming very low on this shoot here. First thing out of the box, out of the shoot, out of the bud are the boys. They're out, they're dropping, pollen's gone as this shoot keeps on growing. It's a good thing too, because oaks are not good self-pollinators. If they do self-pollinate, you have almost 100% failure rate on the acorns. So here we go. So up we go, up we go. Here's a leaf. New bud, hopefully growing in there for next year. Another leaf. New bud. Another leaf, another leaf. Finally, there's something going on there. Let's dig in a little deeper. And those are the girls' leaves. And you can tell by the color of the stigmas mounted on top of the styles that they have not yet successfully pollinated, because they turn dark and then actually black when they're all that. So you can see one kind of good and the other you can't, because there's 2. They normally are in pairs. So let's take a different look here, and we can name the parts. We have, now in this case, we've got a little anthocyanin coloration up in the stigma, not totally unusual in coast live oak, but not every day. And so you've got the stigma mounted on the end of the style, and then you have a perianth. No one can figure out, is that, were those petals, were those sepals? Was it one? We'll just call it a perianth. Cover it all. It's this round tube, and we got to give it a name. So there it is. And then finally below that, the developing cupule. So you've now seen, but we're going to see more, because I have a bonus. And this was cap or cup. Now, I hear that receptacle within which the acorn nut sits, I've heard them call caps. And I've heard them called cups, and I've heard them called those things by botanists. And even, I don't think oakophiles, quercophiles. But we have a question, but it's a history mystery. And the history mystery is, does anyone remember when or many of the family names were different? When Apiaceae was, what was it? And on and on and on, they changed the family names. The current family name for what they call now the beech family, in which the oaks reside, is Fagaceae. And the reason they had to change all these family names because they had to refer to the oldest root genus in that family. So that turned out to be the beeches, genus Fagus. So it became Fagaceae. Had a much more descriptive and interesting name for that. Cuculifery. Mystery solved, right? It only took, looking back at books 100 years old to find that. But, so there you are. And there's more details here that we don't care about. I mean, we do, but we don't have time to care about. So onwards and upwards, the acorn parts are simple. You've got the cup or cupule, you've got the nut. Wait, our second view of the female flower. It's still there, mounted proudly, adorning the tip of the acorn nut. Did you all know that? Be very careful handling these, because if you're too rough, it's gone. But it has all the parts. It's got the stigmas, the styles, the perianth, everything is there. Except, of course, the rest of it is not huge. And the little stem on which an acorn sits is called an peduncle, but they can be zero in length. You know, this acorn can just sit, or the cupule can sit right on a twig. And there you have it. All the basics, bonus mysteries solved, yes. And that means we have time to go back to a bookmark we set and maybe do some more recent history. So recent history of Valley Oaks. So we're gonna look at Valley. There's so much history one could look at, but the Valley Oaks have a special place in Santa Clara Valley history. Slightly before we look at Santa Clara Valley totally, we're gonna look at about 100,000 years ago and see that the oaks weren't so widely distributed as they are today. They were hidden up canyons and places where they could live, they could survive, they could reproduce barely. So call them little refugia, and they were minor refugia. We're not talking huge, vast stands. 15,000 years ago, things were warming up, getting a little better, but even so, San Francisco Bay was San Francisco Valley because there was no bay there. There might have been a delta, but the actual coastline was out by the Farallon Islands. That's where the water dumped. So I guess those would have been the Farallon Peaks or the Farallon foothills, but they weren't the Farallon Islands at that time. And 15,000 years ago, these fossils have been found dating to that time, running around what we now call SF Bay. Giant sloths, giant bison, mammoths, hey, wait, that's not supposed to be so near to our own time. And within 10,000 years, 5,000 years after that, the California oaks found things to their liking and started proliferating and colonizing in California. And that now brings us to Santa Clara County. So 10,000 years ago, that's when the oaks, we assume, of all kinds started coming into the valley. And interestingly, 8,000 BC, oh wait, isn't that about 10,000 years ago in the old-timey talk? Yes. Indigenous people, the Ohlone, were already documented in the Santa Clara Valley. So we've got oaks and we got folks, and we've got almost 10,000 years to develop an agricultural relationship, don't we? And that's indeed what happened. These oak trees were not just random oak trees that survived. These oak trees were owned by individual members of tribes in villages. So a family would own this oak tree, another family would own that oak tree. And if it was up in the foothills, but it was closest to your village, that would be a village tree. So these resources were there and controlled, and fires were set to kill off the undergrowth. But then things happened about 500 years ago. So we had California oaks and European folks. And we're stepping back out of the Santa Clara Valley briefly. So 1542, Cabrillo did a flyby, or I guess a boat by, whatever you would call that, a sail by. And it took over 200 years for the Franciscan Padres to venture north out of Baja and start establishing missions, the religious stuff, and presidios, forts, military stuff. And interestingly, San Jose was the site of one of the very few approved civil pueblos, secular pueblos in California. I think there was another one in Los Angeles, and those were the two. But their job was to supply the forts, the military forts in San Francisco and in Monterey. And shortly thereafter, so we're still in the 1700s, there were two huge expeditions, exploration expeditions, primarily military, but fortunately the science guys go, can I go along, please? And they got to go along, so they were joint military scientific expeditions. One, the Malaspina expedition, visited Monterey very notably, and that was the Spanish expedition. Another, the Vancouver expedition, visited San Francisco, and that one's the most notable because we're then going to venture into the Santa Clara Valley because Vancouver did. Well, Malaspina, look at it, they were everywhere. They raced around the world, they were collecting stuff. They not only collected in Monterey, which is not even noted on this map, but in Nootka, all the way to Alaska. The most notable part of their journey was in their 5-year expedition. They gathered a lot of stuff, took it back to Spain, and 7 years later were published the names of the first two native California oaks. And they were the Valley Oak, White Oak representative, and the Coast Live Oak, not known as the Coast Live Oak in those days. Encino, I think would have been a name more likely. And the Vancouver expedition. Interesting, shorter, but George Vancouver, a Royal Navy captain, British Royal Navy captain, George Vancouver, glad he wrote his reminiscences within a year after the expedition, because at the age of 40, he was dead 2 years after that. So thank you. And his quote begins, we're about 20 miles. And being a detective and chasing down a mystery, I want to know, where was that? So I took out Google Earth and I circled 20 miles, and I ended up having to go down this, around the rocks there in the foothills and into a narrow part to get the full 20 from El Viso. Though maybe it was, his 20 was further up and they just considered that part of it. Nonetheless, the 20 miles for sure encompassed the main part of the wide part of Santa Clara Valley. And one other thing you need to know about his reminiscence is that Santa Clara Valley, as we now know, was full of the agricultural products of the indigenous people, valley oaks. But valley oaks were nothing. They weren't named till years later by Louis in Spain. Aha, but to a sea captain, the English oaks on the right look very similar. Those leaves would definitely evoke the same feeling if you're a non-botanist and a non-oak person. But remember the peduncles? Look at the length of those peduncles on those English oaks. Those are little acorns just forming, and those peduncles are this long, which explains one of the names for the English oak, which is pedunculate oak. But here we go. I want to read this out loud because I love reading it. For about 20 miles, it could only be compared to a park, which had originally been closely planted with the true old English oak. The underwood that had probably attended its early growth had the appearance of having been cleared away and left the stately lords of the forest in complete possession of the soil, which was covered with luxuriant foliage. Doesn't that bring a tear to your eye? And he thought he was looking at a damn park. He was looking at someone's farm. Well, things kept on going. I'm going to show you, now I'm going to draw back to the central valleys and the rivers and share with you that until the mid-1800s, those rivers were lined with oak woodland so dense, they were impenetrable for 4 or 5 kilometers. All across this, and I don't have them all marked in green for a reason, but they were all green and they were all enclosed in this oak woodland. Now, the first wood burning steamships embarked on the Sacramento River in 1847. But their job was to carry supplies from here, ships would come in and drop stuff in San Francisco, and then the steamships would carry it to Sacramento. And then, at least in the early days, it would be these things would be further distributed by wagon, or there wasn't that much stuff that you had to send out into the boonies because there wasn't anything happening in the boonies. Well, it wasn't. But now we'll get a better look. Here, so there's your Sacramento Valley, your San Joaquin Valley, the Central Valleys, all of this was affected. So something happened in 1848. We had the beginning of the gold rush. And that only lasted really in volume until about 1855, so 7 years. But we had tons of miners, mining companies, stores, towns, all this stuff just sprang up on the east side of the valleys. And those supplies, suddenly we have huge amount of supplies that have to be moved and moved efficiently and quickly. Well, no highways, no airports, no railroads, but we did have rivers. And so suddenly the steamboats were running all of these green, the ones I marked in green, the Sacramento River, the Feather River, American River, Mokelumne River, Stanislaus River, Tuolumne River, all the way down to the San Joaquin River. Steamboats were plying these things. And what do you need to run a steamboat? You burn wood, right? And free wood all along the river. Oh my heavens. How long do you think it took for those forests to completely disappear? 20 years. There they are, gone. And if that weren't enough insult, we still got coast ranges, those little hilly places towards the coast. They've got oaks on them too, but we gotta run our livestock, we range improvement, plus we wanna grow stuff, cut them all down. So clear, and then they call that clearing the wilderness. But what was happening in the Santa Clara Valley? Let's come back now. There were no steamships flying anywhere in the Santa Clara Valley, but it was a beautiful place to grow things. And the people by the mid-1800s had started to be displaced into missions, as you already know. And I won't go into that because that's more history than I have time for. But for whatever reason, orchards were a big thing in the 1800s, not just in the Santa Clara Valley, but elsewhere in California, in valleys in California. And so oaks out, orchards in, pears and apples were first, and then lovely French prunes. I don't know what the big deal was about French prunes. I don't even know from French prunes, but apparently I know they're actually a plum, right? They are still grown in one place in California, and that's where that picture is from. But they were just incredible. We got to cut down more of these oaks, get them out of here, and plant a ton of French prunes while I can sell them and make a ton of money. So by 1890, 4.5 million fruit trees have been planted. And you know what that means about the oaks. Oaks gone, fruit trees in, and it's an easy nativity quiz. Gee, what's native to Santa Clara Valley, California, North America? Oaks. Any of these? No, these are all Eurasian species, all of them. So by 1900, this is the last pitiful that I was able to find anywhere, a picture of it. Last pitiful little remnant of a valley oak forest in the far southern reaches of the Santa Clara Valley down by Morgan Hill. And you can already tell that the work of the Padres had been well done, because the forbs that you might normally see aren't there. What you do see are all these non-native grasses already, and the trees just don't look that healthy anymore. And by 1972, this is a map, beautiful map, done by some researchers who mapped Quercus lobata. I had superimposed it on a modern map of the valley. And you can see that the valley is empty of valley oak by 1972, except for a few little X's here and there, and those X's are indeterminate. They could be a tiny little population, they could be a single tree, don't know. But the valley oaks were pushed back into the Santa Cruz Mountains on the one side and into the Diablo Range on the other side, and nothing was left in between. So I went, okay, isn't there somewhere something that we can look at that survived? So I was able to find a list of San Jose heritage trees. I couldn't find one for Santa Clara County, but I did for San Jose, which is most of Santa Clara County up in that area. And I was able to find 4 trees listed in, what year was that? 2012, I think, or earlier. 4 trees that were 72 inches in diameter or bigger. But they didn't say where they measured them. Did they measure them at the ground where they're a lot bigger? Or did they measure them where they're supposed to measure them, about 4.5 feet in the air? So I did my best look around using Google Street View. So I found one of the trees, and there it is. And this is it's an open field for now at the intersection of San Ignacio Avenue and Santa Teresa. So that's kind of far south. And it's a pretty good sized tree. And I took Photoshop, I measured that vehicle and then rechecked the measurement of the trunk of the tree. It wasn't 72 inches. It was really only about 67 inches. But nonetheless, that still would give a reasonable date for this tree, most likely prior to 1800. So that means it's very possible. Oh, wait, where is it? Oh, there's an X. See the X? We'll zoom in. It's possible that Vancouver might have pushed this little sapling aside as he wandered around the Santa Clara Valley, or maybe not. But it's a great fantasy that I want to carry with me. Our last bonus mystery. Are you ready for the biggest valley oak in California? Well, in 2018, it would leave it to the Europeans. None of the Americans seemed interested, but a group of members of the International Oak Society came from Europe to look at this tree. And thank God they photographed it, they measured it. How tall was it? 140 feet tall. It's now owned by the Fetzer family, and it's like a 700-acre spread. And my question is, okay, they measured it in 2018. How big is it really? I mean, we have a barn there, we have a horse there. It's tall. It's really big. It's really big. That trunk measures as big around, or it measured as big around in 2018 when they measured it as a fully mature coast red, not the giant sequoias, but a coast red one. So, and it's only 175 air miles from here, from the library. But is it still there? It was there in 2024. So once again, thank you, Google. But the problem is when I went to Street View, they don't run around and do the Street View every 5 minutes. They often don't do it for years. And so the latest was June of 2022. It was still there. But then I got lucky and I got a set. Funny, I tried different satellite views and I get different aerial dates, and I got a date of May 2024. So at least 2 months ago, still there. And that's my Street View from June of 2022. Looks pretty much exactly like it did. So, and it's right along a highway. Anybody can drive by and look at it. And if you know the Fetzers, all the better. Just maybe they'll let you go in and take a close look at it, get photographed with it. Anyway, those are some of the oak mysteries that I've enjoyed investigating on my behalf and your behalf. And I thank you for your attention. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. take a question?
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Yeah, we have up until 9.
Asks, so that I.
Oh,
know
yeah,
what's wrong
absolutely.
first.
Sure. All right, I'll start with you. And if you can speak loudly, so that we can pick up. I'm trying to record it, so.
Thank you. I'm from San Leandro and would Valley Oaks, are there any maps that sort of show where Valley Oaks were too? Would they have been in San Leandro? Because we don't have very many anymore. Maybe some along San Leandro Creek.
So where I would first go to find information like that is I would go to something called the Consortium of California Herbaria, CCH. Because then I would want verified scientific collections of, and you can ask it to show me all the Valley Oaks in California or in your county or wherever, and they'll map them, it'll map it. And then you can see when it was collected. Oh, 1895, that's not so good. 2023, that's good. And then that Critchfield, and I can't remember his buddy's name, but the Critchfield maps of 1972 will give you an idea, but that was 50 years ago. You know, that's just not current. So I would, if I weren't from, in other words, when I go to investigate an area, that's the first thing I do, is I go to the consortium records. But also you can, these days, iNaturalist, you have to be careful because the identifications are very often wrong. But how do you screw up a Valley Oak, right? So I would say you might very well look at you can do a map of specimens in a given county, Quercus lobata, and see where they are, where you are.
Consortium of what again?
Oh, the first thing was the Consortium of California Herbaria.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the other thing is iNaturalist. Is everybody familiar with iNaturalist?
Yeah.
It's a great crowdsourced resource. But I do a lot of the IDs for oaks. And sometimes I just don't have time to correct all of them. It's like, so use that one with caution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then Aaron.
Are you an advisor to the Peninsula Open Space Trust?
No, but I have conducted a couple of oak walks there in years past up on the top to show people what shreve oaks look like and, you know, and how to tell an Oregon oak from Valley oak and so on and so forth.
Are you a taxonomic botanist?
I am a self-taught student of red oaks. How's that? That's how I got my start. I've been lucky enough to be associated with some academic folks. And so I'm hoping to put together an actual publication describing a new hybrid, a red oak hybrid. But I will ask for lots of help.
How can we learn more from you?
Seriously, yeah.
I will never stop talking. You just.
Aaron and then.
So I was in the horticultural program, and we ended up going on a tour of the outside of the Emerald campus with this guy called David Muffley.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, okay, well, he claims to be very an expert with oaks, and he's brought in a ton of oaks from all over the world from the Apple campus.
Nice.
And was saying that they're kind of the way of the future, and that there's no point in planting Quercus lobata or Quercus, blue oak in this area anymore because of climate change. They won't do well, and I'm wondering what your take on that is.
That's not my area of expertise.
Okay.
I try to figure out what they are. But I have heard that there are some issues with survival in both of those as our climate changes. But there are people who are studying these intensely and then plotting them, their locations against projected future locations. And there's a couple of people at Cal, I think, who've been working on that. And but it doesn't seem like it's so incredibly imminent
Yeah,
as our lifetimes.
okay. It'd just be very sad to see these species disappear.
Oh, absolutely. We've already done so much.
Oh, I know. That was very sad.
I'm blessed with a blue oak in my front yard.
Yay.
We had, right, I planted it
Oh, excellent.
3 years ago, and no, street. Replaced magnolia. And I'm blessed also with an oak titmouse. And it's a very loud. You can say anything about the birds that inhabit oaks and are their preference.
Where I live, I planted a valio from the San Joaquin, well, actually from the foothills in Santa Cruz. And the critters that seemed like the adjacent, it's a battle between the valley oak and then the coastline oak, which keep jumping in there and taking over as volunteers. But the birds that I have, and I don't have any of those, are the jays. The jays seem to go nuts over the acorns, and they like particularly the coastline oak trees because they're really spiny leaved and they can set up nests in there that mostly don't get marauded. And so that would be the one that I would say is, hey, jays, go with those scrub jays. Did that answer your question at all?
Well, the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Vicky.
Where do pork oaks fit?
Cork oaks were in, they're in a section Ceres. So they are a European oak, and Quercus suber, as I recall, is the genus species. And interestingly, the last I was aware, they have not naturalized in California. They're widely planted over by Davis. There's some incredible old cork oaks that they planted years ago because they wanted to, before World War I think, cut off the cork and make gaskets out of them because otherwise we were dependent on Europe to get our cork for gaskets for the war machines. So that was an interesting story. Whereas a Quercus ilex, which is a hollyleaf oak, in an adjacent section, excuse me, is found in Santa Cruz naturalizing. In other words, it has naturalized and may even hybridize with the cork oak that is there.
We've got Vicky and then Erica, and then Tony. Hey, Vicky, oh.
Can you say something about this photograph? What kind of oak is it?
That's a coastline oak. A very old, okay, so some wag long ago, a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, said oaks spend 1 or more 100 years growing, 1 or more 100 years being there, and 1 or more 100 years dying. And so this one's in the downhill side of its life, and pieces are falling off every decade or so. It's still there today. I took this picture 10 or 15 years ago, and it's on the campus of the University of California, Santa Cruz.
The very first picture you showed, I think you said it was an acorn weevil.
Yes,
Can you tell me, you said something about it sounded really interesting. Can you just repeat what you were, like, what their role on the tree is?
so what they, it's very interesting, because they actually lay their eggs in the acorns. So you saw that proboscis, and the females have these incredibly long proboscis with, mouth parts at the end. Males don't need such long ones because they're not laying eggs, and you go, how do you lay eggs through your mouth? But that's not what they do. So they drill a hole into the acorn, and then they turn around, and they have parts on their bottoms that can actually check out this oak now that I drilled a hole and be sure it's really okay. And if it is, in go the egg. Boom, boom, boom. And so if you have a chance to search YouTube for deep look acorn weevil or oak weevil, they do a nice little short on that. It's just very incredible.
All right, Stella and Vicky.
I have 2 questions. One, do you actually recognize the struggling forms of the interior like oak?
No,
You know, so whatever we see up in the mountains, like Montebello, we see some struggling oaks,
right.
but it's not over foliage. So we have been calling them with the thing.
Voiceless any, yeah,
Protected.
and they're not. That's part of why I put those in a separate group there. It's very complicated. It goes back a couple hundred years when the person who originally named them, oh, they came from Mexico. Oh, no, now I'm fixing what I said before. Now they come from Auburn. Oh, and by the way, I'm now naming this variety that looks like what you're describing, but the problem is his description was what the original species was described as, and what he was calling the original species and redescribing incorrectly was actually a hybrid between black, anyway, it's a mess. And our DNA analysis in 2017 demonstrated that it was not a thing. So I would have to look at it, because that's an area where you get a lot of introgression, you get a lot of hybridization, and Bonnie Doon Ecological Reserve, where I spent a lot of time, those were all called scrubby interior live oaks, and indeed, instead, they're hybrids between Shreve oak and coast live oak.
And Shreve
Coast live oak and Shreve oak. And so that's another paper that's got to be done with the DNA work and everything to be able to name those very hard to, it's easy when you got a black oak that's deciduous and you cross it with any of the other red oaks that are evergreen and look totally different. When you get an F1 hybrid, it's right there. Go out in the fall or the winter and find them. Here one there. But two evergreen oaks that don't look that different. When they hybridize, that's much trickier.
So what's the difference between chase oak and oracle oak?
Well, oracle oak is an incorrect name. Thank you for bringing that up. That's why I had it there. The actual name is Abrams oak. So, and the reason is that the guy who named it, Kellogg, the venerated Kellogg, when he wrote his paper, publishing Quercus morhus, which at the time he thought was a species, he, in the paper, named it Abrams oak. He didn't call it oracle oak. This is something Jepson, evil Jepson, by the way, not very well liked at Cal, decided to just do once Kellogg died, is to give it a different common name. And so I'm right here. Abrams oak, no more oracle oak. And the problem is oracle oak, that name is misapplied to a whole bunch of different hybrids. It can be applied to a chase oak. It can be applied to an Abrams oak. And it can be applied to a Woodlands oak. All of these are valid hybrids. And so I think we need to get rid of that name because it is just causing trouble in so many ways. Does that help? Not really.
So the oracle oak, I'm thinking is the Morehouse.
Okay, so Quercus morhus is Abrams oak, not oracle. So that name is incorrect. That common name is incorrect.
So what's the difference between that and the chase oak? How can you tell them apart?
How can I tell which of them?
The Abrams oak. I'm
You,
from
they're not, okay, the oracle oak is not a legitimate name.
I think you're talking about chase oak.
Okay, so the chase oak is a little different than, okay, where do you find Abrams oak? You find it in the Sierra Foothills, because that's where you find black oak and interior. So anything over here, not in the Sierra Nevada foothills, is going to be a chase oak most likely, or a wooden oak, which none of you have heard of because it hasn't been published yet, which is a cross between a black oak and a Shreve oak. So anyway, I know it's like, that's why I didn't get into all that stuff. It's a whole other talk. So. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead. And then we have a
A
question.
couple of questions, and one of them is, what do you think of Quercus ilex in California? Because, well, I had a tree coming up in my backyard that's probably planted by squirrels or jays, and I protected it. I thought it was coast life, and I think it's not. I think it's the other one, the ilex.
So when you flip, when you
Wow.
flip the leaf over, is it kind of white?
Ilex,
Yeah.
And it's not
Sorry.
green?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
I figured,
okay.
I had an oak come up in my backyard that I thought was coast life for the longest time, and then I realized it had pointy leaves instead of rounded. And so I thought maybe it's the holly oak ilex, Quercus ilex instead, and I was asking about, now I have this big tree in the backyard. You can't really, it costs a lot to take them down, and there seems to be some wildlife value, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on it.
Well, Quercus ilex is a European species,
Mhm.
and it's planted, quite widely planted as a street tree. But unfortunately, if you get a bunch of them together, they also naturalize. They drop babies.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, so they can grow. Normally, it would have to be not too far from another ilex for it to grow, or for it to appear in your yard. It would have to be a larger ilex tree.
They're-
Not too
They're
far
there,
away.
they're there, so we had both in the neighborhood.
Yeah, if you like it, I wouldn't have any problem with keeping it, other than, you know, you're probably not in a native environment where you are, right?
No.
It's okay.
Um,
Oak trees are good.
Yeah, so does it provide wildlife value? I mean, it just hurts me a little bit that it's not a coast life oak.
You should observe and study it, because I don't know.
Okay,
That would be a great project, fun project, to just kind of keep your eyes out and see if all these things that like oaks also like the European oak.
and then I'm just wondering, looking at this picture here, my understanding was that oaks have very strong limbs, and so I thought, okay, that's a good way to tell people that they should be planting these trees. They have a lot of wildlife value, but that doesn't look like it's safe. So I'm just wondering, what can we do to incorporate these trees into our suburban and urban areas in a way that will, one, be safe, and two, convince people that it's doable?
If you planted that tree, it would not be doing this within your lifetime or probably your children's lifetime. So that's one answer, is that, you know, at some point, things get big, and what would normally happen in a city environment like this, it would have been cut down long ago.
Okay.
So, but it's so interesting, the students go up there and pray to him, you know, it's like a wonderful thing, you know, they set up their chairs and watch the sunset behind it.
Thank you.
Right, so we had a question back there.
I was just wondering if the female flower is always located typically on the shoot, is that just a way to avoid self-pollination?
Are they always higher on the shoot?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, I've never found any lower. Now, with the trees that I study, the red oaks, I've generally only found reproductive buds or vegetative buds. So the vegetative buds just coming out and doing leaves, nothing else. The reproductive buds popping the boys, then further up the girls, and later. I think I found one tree once that had no male catkins, but did have female flowers further up, but generally that's an exception in my world.
One more, any tips to identify between Gariana and Lobata?
That's an interesting one. Have you ever talked to Prahlad Papper up at Santa Rosa? He's done a lot of DNA work on them. And I just paid attention to him because he was the expert in that area. And he said, Paul, darn it, I keep checking all these more southern Oregon oaks, Quercus gariana, and they are lobata. They're valley oaks. They just have these leaves that aren't quite as deeply lobed as I want them to be. So, yeah, it was, again, a thing that's very questionable. I looked at a specimen that had been identified by John Tucker at Fort Ord, and it was clearly a lobata and not a gariana. And so, yeah, there you go. You got to go north. Now you get up into Oregon, Southern Oregon, you have nothing but gariana. You're not going to find any lobata at all.
We have one more question, and then I think we're getting to the point where we need to.
In that case, it's a two-part question. Do we know if any of the oak varieties like Valley versus Coast Live are more keystone benefit wildlife more than another? And also, is any one species more fire safe than another? If they have their roots down in the water table, are they likely to burn during the summer?
And I'm not an expert in either one of those areas, so I don't have an answer. I studied to find the answer as to, in general, what critters are on the oaks. I don't know of any study, I couldn't see one, where they looked at one species of tree and then compared it with another. There are some, if you go digging for fire stuff, there are some papers on fire and how the trees respond, but it's more to, the coastline oak are generally a little better at coming through a fire. Like there was that big fire down near Paul, Colorado, on Big Sur a few years ago. And it was a place where I've been studying. It was the holotype location for Shreve oak. And I had been studying a lot there. When I went back in, same fire burned everything. And the coast live oak were root sprouting quite nicely, and the Shreve were dead. So, personal experience, anecdotal, one little experience. So I offer that.
Yeah. I was down in a cave in the Sierras, one of the ones where the tourists go down in the ground, And we were 200 feet below the surface and we looked up and roots were coming through the ceiling of the cave. And they said they had them genetically tested and they were oak roots. And they have water droplets dripping off of them. So you can imagine the roots go down really far to find water. And then wet wood is really hard to burn. If you're a firewood collector and you have wood, it's real, so I imagine they'd be fairly fireproof. Yeah, I'm guessing.
Well, it's fun. Don't ever plant your oak in a pot with a hole in the bottom, sitting on dirt. You'll be very sorry you did, because they're a taproot critter. And great story, by the way. Any other questions that I won't know the answer to?
How do you, what's your process? Like, if you want to get into doing what you're doing, what would we do? What do you do?
Well, so I had my degree in biological sciences long ago. And I couldn't find work, either get paid as a biologist or that it was going to be interesting at all. It would be some horrible thing that somebody else was going to tell me to do that was not going to be cool. So I taught myself to be a mechanic. And I stayed working in the car business, then on the side, did the thing I loved without having to be paid for it. So, and then when I retired, I hadn't ruined it. I hadn't ruined my love of natural science by holding a job in it. And then I was able to jump back in with both my feet after retirement. Okay. I've been doing it for over 20 years.
A lot of what you do, going through old papers that people have written, all this stuff. Do you do genetic testing and?
I was trying to avoid it. I'm way too old to be starting some new gig like that. But it's getting harder and harder to avoid being sucked in that rabbit hole. So, and I'm starting to. Oh, no.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to cut it off now. I heard you say you might be willing to do another talk for us, so you've got.
Oh, I'll have to create something.
Okay.
But how about next year, give me about 6 months, because I've got a big thing I gotta do in Popland. And that's gonna be a 3D thing. So I may have more material from you.
Okay, something to look forward to. Thank you so much. That was fascinating.
Thanks for being interested. I appreciate it. All right.
One more plug for the plant ID class in October. Our class is going to be Joe Burnett doing a discussion of open.
I'd like to introduce myself.
More about it.